a good thing.
Yeah. But you don't have to come.
All right.
Come later.
We are live. Woo woo.
Oh, yay! Well, hello, everybody out there in small business land. We have been having some technical issues, which is sort of
Which is code for I'm having a bad hair day.
Is that why you're on Mary Sue? It has nothing to do with your camera. Well, Mary Sue is here, but she is in a bubble, so hopefully that's not too awkward. But speaking of awkward, we are talking today about networking. And for some of us, it comes very naturally. But for others like me, it doesn't necessarily come as naturally, particularly if you consider yourself a card-carrying introvert. And luckily, my friend Lisa here, Lisa Platt, she is the founder of Networking Made Simple, and I got to know her through these referral calls, and her expertise is actually helping sensitive introverts be more effective, actually start to enjoy networking so they can reap the benefits just like the extroverts. So with Small Business Grits Sales Circus, on the horizon coming up in March, we designed these to be very interactive and so people can benefit from meeting each other and collaborating and networking. But it occurred to me that maybe that's actually scaring people away. Or maybe some people are, holding off and like waiting for the recording because they're less comfortable in that situation. So Lisa, we are going to lean on your expertise so you can help our future attendees like feel comfortable in these kinds of situations. So thank you.
So thank you so much, Jennifer and Mary Sue, and thank you very much for that warm introduction. So I hope that you can see and hear me okay, because I've had technical challenges all morning. So I'm so happy to be here, and the last time I was invited to speak somewhere, almost everyone showed up for the recording, so I'm used to it.
Yeah,
and it's the nature of the business, and it's because networking can be really challenging. But if you learn a couple of tips, it can become easier and manageable. And one of the key differences between introverts and extroverts is how we manage our energy. Where a lot of times for introverts or just very sensitive professionals, showing up is scary, it's intimidating. It feels like, I don't know if you ever watched the old I Love Lucy reruns, where Lucy's always wanting to be on stage. Ricky doesn't want her on stage, and he literally has the giant hook, and he pulls her off stage.
Yes.
So back when I first started networking, that was my fear. I just didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to do small talk. And I had visions of just somebody either taking that giant hook and just grabbing me off the front of the room, or having that big giant gong from that other old TV show, The Gong Show.
Yes.
And just going, boom, you're off. And so I went to this group, and they used to go around the room in a U, and I would always sit at the last table secretly praying that I wouldn't have to talk. But I can assure you, I've learned some things along the way, and I'm happy to share. So the first thing that I want to share is, and it's going to sound really simple, but be prepared. And that just involves doing a couple of things. First of all, understand and be very clear on your purpose. Why are you there? What do you want to accomplish? And that could be any myriad of things. It could be to meet new people. It could be to have lunch with a couple of friends. It could be for the education, the speaker, to meet somebody. Whatever your reason, just know what it is and be very, very clear. And the thing that goes along with that is have clear, specific goals. And that there's a fine line that differentiates. So if my purpose is to meet new people, maybe my goal is to meet 2 new people. And this can be done virtually, or this can be done when we go back to having those larger in-person events. But know why you're there. And that just helps, because now I have the subjective. And most of the people that I work with who struggle with networking, they are very task oriented. And one of my clients one day, this light bulb went off when I shared this. She said, "Oh, I'm just very task oriented. I could just see attending a networking function as a task." And once she did that, it made it okay.
Well, I don't consider myself a card carrying introvert, although, because I totally show up unprepared and I kind of like going on the seat of my pants. But as an extrovert, I have also found it difficult to go into networking events and not have a goal, or having this really, as a business owner, I was like, so I'm supposed to go to this networking event and find my next client. How am I going to do that? That was so overwhelming. So I think just making it smaller and simpler and achievable is, makes so much sense to me as well.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Okay, here's the part of networking that makes me very anxious and nervous, and it happens in the virtual scenario too. I get really nervous when it comes to like doing my intro or being called upon and then speaking in front of the group. And I've got my intro pretty much down, but it always makes me nervous, and particularly if it's a large group or a group of people that I'm really unfamiliar with. I'm better in like small groups. But as soon as that group gets really big, I am so nervous. And I don't know necessarily, do you have any tips for that?
Yeah, I do. First of all, everybody gets nervous, even extroverted people. And if you look at the person who I'm going to refer to as the performer, which maybe you see this more in person than on Zoom. I haven't seen this much on Zoom, where they're equally as nervous, but instead of crawling under their shell, they perform. They'll get up and they'll sing something, or they'll tell a bunch of jokes and everybody will applaud and laugh and say, "Oh, you're awesome, you have a great voice." But the reality is, unless they're wearing a logoed shirt from their business, I have no idea who they are and what they do and why they're there. So people show their nerves in different ways. But again, the key is, Jennifer, is being prepared, because your introduction, whether it's 30 seconds for a minute or 20 seconds, has three easy parts. And they are an opening, a middle, and a close. So you just need three little things: an opening, a middle, and a close. The opening and the close can be as simple as stating your name and your company name. And if you have 30 seconds when you do that, each of those takes about 3 seconds. So that gives you about 24 seconds for the middle or content. And then think about, what do you want to share? I mean, if you're showing up with people you see regularly, you want to share what's new and exciting, that you have this Facebook Lives on Monday, you have this event Tuesday afternoon, you have this upcoming event in March, whatever's happening in your world that's new and exciting. If you're attending somewhere for the first time, or you're seeing people you haven't seen in a long while, you might want to share the mission and a couple of sentences. Just remind people of what your business is about.
Yes, I have
And
totally seen those kind of people where it's like they feel more comfortable in the drama.
yeah, I
And when
mean,
we
when
have a Facebook user, I think it's Rachel Hedman that mentioned she's a storyteller by trade. So she is agreeing that she gets butterflies, not that she's necessarily performing, but
Yeah, and I like that adrenaline kicks in. And I get that too. Like there's a certain amount of adrenaline that actually starts to work for you. And there's a certain amount of nervousness, I think, that works for me anyway. Like there's, I can kind of feel when it's like in a healthy range and when it's like a crippling range. I try to not get to the crippling range, but sometimes it happens.
I think everybody gets nervous every so often, and I think that's normal and it's okay. And I think something else to just make the process easier, and I don't think this matters if you're an introvert or an extrovert, it just know that it doesn't matter what the person before you or after you says or does. I mean, they can be somebody who could be on stage for the the next nighttime comic to be the replacement. Or they could be somebody who could barely get 2 words out of their mouth and you actually feel for them. But
Yeah.
what's important is that when it's your turn to speak, and if people are laughing or chit-chatting, just pause so people will pay attention to you. Say what you came to say, and that's that, and go on. And I think the other thing that people need to remember is people are more concerned about themselves and what they're going to do than whether you say what you meant to say or if you ended up flubbing it, forgetting something. Nobody's going to know that unless you point it out. And that's one of the things I learned years ago at Toastmasters is don't draw attention to your mistakes, just go forward.
So true. So we have
That-
someone else that also said, yeah, planning ahead of time will definitely help a lot. And this was someone else's suggestion. Breathing helps.
Yeah.
yeah. Here's something.
If you
Oh,
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask. So another, I'm going to turn this into something that's all about me, but hopefully other introverts can relate. So another thing that I do this in in-person events, and I find myself doing it in virtual events, particularly when there's like breakout rooms or if there's any sort of freedom of navigation within those breakout rooms. I tend to find like somebody that I'm comfortable talking to, and then I glue myself to them, and I don't mingle, right? So whoever was nice to me is like basically stuck with me for the entire networking event because I'm like comfortable. So, and this just, I don't know if you have any tips for that. I'm trying to get better and not, become a barnacle on somebody's side during a networking event, but I've definitely done it.
Well, first of all, did it ever occur to you that they might appreciate you being their buddy and just hanging out with them?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a possibility. I'm quite charming, but
Okay. So just keep that in mind. And it's when you look at how people interact, and I always share this with people that it's okay to be the listener. It's okay to feel whatever you're feeling and know that it's okay. And again, just do help be comfortable. I mean, I've been in several virtual meetings with you, Jennifer, and you're charming and you're cheerful and you're fun to be around.
oh,
I agree.
thank you. You're too sweet. You are too
Yeah.
sweet.
So just be yourself and don't worry about what other people think of you.
Yeah.
And I know that's easier said than done, but with practice, it gets easier.
Yes. Well, and I don't know if you're going to get to this, Lisa, but I was thinking, what kind of networking, in virtual events works well for introverts? As since we're planning for Sales Circus in March, what could we be doing that will draw out the introverts so that they really feel like they're engaging and getting themselves heard?
I think sometimes a smaller group, a smaller breakout room, I think
Yeah.
people are more comfortable with. And maybe having objectives or talking points ahead of time. For some people, that's helpful. I mean, I personally, when I do facilitate my organization events, I don't like the guided conversation or guided around a topic. But if you had breakout rooms and a question to answer, similar to what you did with the turbo networking, that concept I think is good, where people go into smaller rooms and they're all interacting around an objective.
Yeah.
I mean, I recently did virtual speed networking at my organization for the first time, and everybody loved it. And a couple of people, just because of the number of people, a couple of times they were in rooms of 3 versus 2. And the feedback I received was everybody preferred the one-on-one, the 2 people in a breakout room,
Yeah.
because they had the opportunity to get to know somebody more And these are people who knew each other, but they really, and it didn't matter if they were introverted or extroverted, they just appreciated that one-on-one conversation and that opportunity to go deeper.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. As I think this is an introvert thing. I do not like small talk. So I would much rather talk to somebody one-on-one or a group of 2 or 3 people and have a more substantive conversation than just talk about frivolous topics, trivial topics. I just cannot stand that. But so yeah, that's really good to know. And then okay, Facebook user. Sometimes smaller rooms mean more pressure, at least for Zoom. Well, that's something.
That's an interesting twist, huh?
Yes, that is an interesting twist.
It can be. I probably used to think that way until I did a couple of meetings that had the smaller breakouts, and then I found myself enjoying them more. Because think of connecting people, and I think this will just make it easier for everybody. If you, back before pandemic life, when we used to do things and go to parties and socialize in larger groups, but think of if you went to a party at your best friend's house and just say you were in the kitchen and there was somebody there that you didn't know, and say in the kitchen, that's where all the beverages were being served. And you would see somebody and you would just probably naturally say hi, and they would say hi, and you might say something like, "Hi, I'm Lisa." And they might say, "Hi, I'm Jennifer." And probably the next thing that you'd want to know is, "Well, how do you know my best friend?" And you would say, "Well, how do you know Susie?" And they say, "Oh, I used to work with her." "And how do you know Susie?" "I work with her." So that's a non-threatening way to just kind of meet somebody. And networking is really the same thing, because networking is just building relationships with people. And I think the biggest challenge is the word itself, net work. Think of WORK, big capital letters, and then ING. And that's scary and intimidating. But what if it was called?
Go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead. I was going to say, just what it was called, net funning.
Yeah, I was thinking that should be the name, but it doesn't really roll off the tongue. But it's much better than.
Yeah. Well, I was also thinking networking. You feel this, or at least I feel this pressure to have it be substantial and productive, and all these other things that make the whole act of it really just overwhelming. Because my goal is usually to find 2 or 3 people that I would like to have a virtual coffee with, where I get to know them a little bit better after the networking event, instead of, trying to find my next business partner or my next client or something else.
Yeah, it's so funny. I'm much better about having that type of goal now, Mary Sue. But in my early days of networking, I usually had one of 2 goals. One, don't do something weird or like memorable in a bad way. And 2, how long do I need to stay before I can leave? Like leave without being weird. Those were the early days. I've evolved as a person, as a human. I've had some personal growth, but that was literally I was like, I've got to do this. I've got to do this because I'm a business person. I've got to network. But how long do I need to be here? And don't trip over your word something deal, like in front of people. If you can do it like that. So,
I have a
lot of people.
Go ahead, sorry.
Okay, go for it.
I was going to ask if introverts actually prefer virtual networking over in person.
I do.
And what I like about it is it evens the playing field.
Mm-hmm.
If the meeting is facilitated well, it evens the playing field. I mean, it's a lot easier to mute somebody when you're the facilitator, if you've had to, versus the person who's going around and trying to grab a microphone out of somebody's hand. Or one of the chambers that I'm a member of, when we met in person, there'd be 70-some people at a breakfast, and they'd want to do the introductions, like each person had 20 seconds. And half the people would just ignore it, and the people facilitating would like literally have to pull this cordless
Yes,
microphone thing away from people.
that I
And
find that so annoying. So annoying.
yeah, and I think that having a Zoom at this point, it levels the playing field, it evens it out. And if somebody needs to take breath, it's okay to turn your camera off. Everybody, the meetings flow better if people are muted unless it's their turn to talk. And if somebody turns off their camera for a few minutes, nobody cares.
Yeah. Well, and also you don't have to worry about, oh, like who am I going to talk to? Because you're all, like you said, it's a great equalizer because you're all either in the same Zoom room, or if they're breakout rooms, there's somebody sort of orchestrating that. So there's no like, oh, I don't have anybody to talk to, or nobody's going to come over here or I'm going to have to enter this group of people and try to like ease into their conversation without being, weird and awkward about it. Yeah. So I definitely, for those reasons, have enjoyed the virtual networking much better. Here's another great question. Do you have any tips for nervous talkers, people who start babbling nervously in these situations? I'm also raising my hand right now. Yes, I would love to hear your answer for that.
I would say is take a deep breath and breathe. And I think the way to try to offset it is one, practice before you even start the meeting and just figure out what you want to say. If everyone's doing 30-second introductions, write it out. It's okay to use notes. And whatever happens, happens. And just don't beat yourself up with if you felt like you were to this or to that, or, people wish they could have just taken that giant hook and pulled you off stage. Just let it go and know that next time it's going to be easier. And you can always find a mentor and work with somebody one-on-one to practice ahead of time and to find out and work through some of the blocks that make all that nervousness show up. But my biggest thing would say is write out what you want to say ahead of time and use the chat. I mean, the chat, think of it as a great way to exchange business cards. Mute yourself, type your contact info, type your website, say, hey, it's great to see everybody. And if it becomes really intimidating, what you can do is say, I'm so sorry, I have another meeting. I'll catch up with you guys later. Bye. And then just excuse yourself and move on.
Like that.
And if anybody would want to just further explore just working one-on-one or just having a conversation with how to work through something that's a little more personally, Lisa E. Platt on Facebook, and just send me a message and I'll get back to you.
I love it. Well, so before we end this Facebook Live and move on over to Clubhouse, I wanted to get a feel for your personal background, Lisa, because I have a feeling you come from a place of, do you consider yourself a sensitive introvert? Is that why you're drawn to working with them specifically?
Yes. And
yeah.
Back when I first started my first business, my prior career was retail management, and my job was to take care of clients once they came to the store, not go out and find customers. So I had this brilliant idea that, I wanted to do something else, and that since I was successful running a business with somebody else's money, because I didn't own the business, I could just easily then go out and run my own business. So I started a personal services company. And what I learned about that was when I first started showing up at events, I had the worst time talking about myself and my business. I could answer questions. But my second paying client owned the print shop of where I had business cards made up. And she was asking me questions, and she had and my company was then called Errands Galore. And she had to pry it out of me with what was that and what I was doing. I mean, I couldn't even tell somebody. And then when I went to these events, I remembered something that I learned at a workshop. was helping with registration is a great way to meet people. So I had an opportunity. I volunteered to help with registration, not because it was a great way to meet people, because it is, but because it gave me something to do during that mix and mingle period. And
Yeah.
what I figured out along the way is when I worked in retail, the company I worked for wanted us to follow a script. And I figured out through helping with registration and figuring out, writing out my introduction, that it's the same as a mini speech. I learned how to write my own script. And once I did that, everything became easy. And I've built a career on helping with registration because that led to one thing to another and facilitating meetings. And then I had the opportunity to buy one of the networking organizations that I used to help run. And out of that, I've built a coaching business where I help sensitive introverts learn to connect with confidence and communicate with intention.
I love it.
Yes, I love it too. And I really feel just like it makes me think of like on the web, anything that assists people with any disabilities is the word that comes to mind. I know that's not politically correct anymore, but if you see anything that helps people that have visual impairments, it always helps everyone. And the same with these tips and tricks for introverts in networking environments. Those are the same tips that really do work as well for extroverts. So I appreciate you sharing all those. And someone that was listening also said it was a brilliant, one of your comments was a brilliant idea.
Awesome. I love it.
Thank you.
We're going to take this conversation to a different platform. For those of you who are on Clubhouse, we're going to open up a Clubhouse room called Virtual Networking for Introverted Entrepreneurs. You can find it by that name, or you can find it by our usernames. I'm at Jen Crawford on Clubhouse. Mary Sue is Work Smarter CRM on Clubhouse. And Lisa is Lisa Platt 27 on Clubhouse. So we hope we'll see you over there. I think it's a perfect platform for introverts because it's audio only and it's opt-in to come on the stage, or you're invited in and you can decide. So you have complete control over whether or not you're a wallflower or not. So I personally really love it. It's a great new way to communicate with people. So we'll see you there in 2 and 2, as Chuck Woolery used to say. Just dated me like tremendously. That's okay.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Mary Sue. Thank you, Jennifer. I'll see you on Clubhouse. Bye.
All right.
Bye, all.
Bye, everybody.